Commander Lee Soo-jin stood at the wide window of her ship, looking out at the endless stars. The human dreadnought Indomitable moved slowly through space, its massive hull gleaming under distant suns. She held a small device in her hands, reading the same message for the 10th time in 3 days. The message came from the Galactic Council. It was written in the formal language that all species used when they wanted to sound important. Soo-jin had learned to hate that language over her 20 years of military service. Commander Lee Soo-jin of the Human Colonial Defense Force, the message began. You are hereby summoned to appear before the Great Assembly on Nexus Prime. You must answer charges of aggressive expansion and violation of established territorial boundaries. Failure to appear will result in immediate sanctions against all human colonies. Soo-jin closed the device and placed it on the metal table beside her. Through the window, she could see 3 other human ships keeping pace with the Indomitable. They were smaller vessels, but each one carried enough firepower to level a city. The thought gave her no comfort. Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind her. She did not need to turn around to know who was coming. Lieutenant Park Ji-ho had been her aide for 5 years. He walked with a slight limp from the battle at Kepler Station, where shrapnel had torn through his left leg. The doctors had offered to fix the limp completely, but Ji-ho chose to keep it as a reminder of the friends he had lost that day. Commander, Ji-ho said as he entered the room. His voice was calm, but Soo-jin could hear the worry underneath. I have the intelligence report you requested. Soo-jin finally turned around. Ji-ho was a young man, barely 30, with the kind of serious face that made him look older than his years. He carried a tablet in his hands, and his uniform was perfectly pressed, just as it had been every day since she had known him. Tell me, Soo-jin said. Ji-ho activated the tablet and several holographic images appeared in the air between them. The first image showed the massive space station that served as the Galactic Council headquarters. It looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, beautiful and cold at the same time. Our sources inside the council confirm what we suspected, Ji-ho began. This is not really a trial. The 3 major species have been planning this for months. The hologram changed to show 3 different alien forms. The first was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected light in strange ways. The second resembled a giant insect, with 6 arms and compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. The third was harder, to see clearly, appearing as a shifting cloud of energy that sometimes took the shape of a person. The Vorthak, the Kalani, and the Nexari, Soo-jin said, naming each species as their images appeared. The 3 most powerful voices in the council. Yes, Commander. They have been meeting in secret sessions for the past 6 months. Our spy network managed to record some of their conversations. Ji-ho touched the tablet again, and the sound of alien voices filled the room. The translation system made the voices sound flat and emotionless, but the meaning was clear enough. The 3 species were afraid. They spoke of human ships that moved faster than expected, human weapons that hit harder than predicted, and human soldiers who refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds. They planned this trial as justification, Ji-ho continued. Once they declare us guilty, they will claim the right to launch what they call a preventive military action against our colonies. Soo-jin walked back to the window. In the distance, she could see the lights of a human colony ship. It was heading toward the outer rim, carrying families who wanted to build new homes on empty worlds. Those families had no idea that the most powerful species in the galaxy were planning to destroy them. How long do we have? She asked. The trial is scheduled for next week. Intelligence believes the attack will come within days after the verdict is announced. Soo-jin was quiet for a long time. She had fought in the colony wars, the series of battles that established humanity's right to expand beyond their home system. She had seen human ships burn and human soldiers die defending the right of families to build homes wherever they chose. The memory of those battles filled her with a cold anger that she kept carefully controlled. Commander, Ji-ho said softly, there is something else. She turned back to him. His expression had grown even more serious. I have been studying the Council's legal codes, looking for anything that might help us in the trial. Most of their laws are designed to favor the older species, but I found something interesting. The hologram changed again, showing lines of text in the ancient script that the Council used for their most important documents. This is from the original treaty that established the Council chambers, Jiho explained. It says that no being may bring weapons or armor into the sacred halls of deliberation. The law is thousands of years old, from back when the Council settled disputes through ritual combat instead of legal arguments. Sujin studied the text. An idea was beginning to form in her mind, something that had been growing since she first received the summons. They expect me to walk in there defenseless, she said slowly. That appears to be their plan, yes. Sujin moved to another table where several small containers sat waiting. She had brought them from Earth, carrying them carefully through space like precious treasure. Inside each container were the cremated remains of human soldiers who had died in the service of others. She opened one container and looked at the fine gray ash inside. This had once been Captain Kim Dong-soo, who died defending a medical station from pirates. The pirates had wanted to steal medicine meant for sick children. Kim had held them off long enough for the medicine to be delivered, but the effort had cost him his life. Jiho, Sujin said, send a message to my family on Earth. Tell them I need the old tools, the ones my grandmother used for traditional crafts. Have them shipped here immediately. Jiho looked confused but nodded. Yes, Commander. May I ask why? Sujin smiled for the first time in days. It was not a happy smile, but it was filled with purpose. The Council wants to judge humanity. They think they can intimidate us by forcing us to stand trial without protection. She closed the container gently. They are about to learn that humans have ways of carrying our strength that they never imagined. The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter as the Indomitable continued its journey toward Nexus Prime, and the trial that would determine the fate of humanity's future in the galaxy. The transport ship carrying Commander Lee Sujin dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Prime. The massive space station hung before them, like a jewel made of crystal and light. It was beautiful in a way that made Sujin think of ice sculptures, perfect and cold and untouchable. 3 Vorthak ships moved toward them immediately. The crystal beings never took chances when it came to security. Sujin watched through the viewport as the alien vessels took positions around her transport. Their hulls gleamed like mirrors, reflecting the light from the nearby star. Incoming transmission, reported the pilot, a young woman named Han So-young. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it might be her last. They want to speak with you directly, Commander. Sujin nodded and activated the communication system. The image that appeared before her was tall and angular, made of what looked like living diamond. Light moved through its crystalline body, in patterns that hurt human eyes to watch for too long. I am crystalline singer Velthar, the being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes made of broken glass. I will escort you to the diplomatic quarter. You will follow our instructions. Exactly. I understand, Sujin replied calmly, the crystal being tilted its head, studying her through the transmission. Your species has caused much trouble for the galaxy. Soon that trouble will end. Sujin said nothing. She had learned long ago that aliens often revealed more when humans remained silent. Velthar seemed disappointed by her lack of response and cut the transmission. 2 hours later, Sujin found herself in the diplomatic quarters assigned to humanity. The rooms were comfortable enough with furniture sized for human bodies and air that smelled clean. But she could see the subtle signs that told her this was also a prison. The windows were too thick to break. The doors would only open from the outside. The communication system had been disabled. Lieutenant Park Jiho stood beside a large table where dozens of small containers had been arranged. Each one was labeled with a name and date. These were the remains of human heroes, soldiers who had died protecting others. Sujin had carried them across the galaxy for this moment. The traditional tools arrived from Earth this morning, Jiho said quietly. Your family included a message. Sujin took the small datapad he offered. Her grandmother's wrinkled face appeared on the screen, speaking in Korean. The old woman's voice was soft, but strong. Little flower, her grandmother said. using the childhood name that only family knew. I do not understand why you need the old bone crafting tools, but I trust your wisdom. These tools have been in our family for 12 generations. They were used to honor the dead and give strength to the living. Use them well. Sujin smiled and closed the message. She moved to another table where the traditional tools were laid out. They looked simple compared to modern technology, just carved pieces of wood and metal that had been shaped by hand centuries ago. But they had been used by her ancestors to create beautiful things from the bones of honored dead. "Commander," Jiho said carefully, "what exactly are you planning to do?" Sujin opened the first container and looked at the fine ash inside. This had once been Sergeant Lee Min-ho, who died defending a group of alien refugees from slavers. The slavers had wanted to capture the aliens and sell them to the highest bidder. Min-ho had fought them alone for 6 hours, giving the refugees time to escape. In the old days, Korean warriors would carry pieces of their fallen brothers into battle, Sujin explained as she began to work. They believed it gave them the strength and courage of those who had gone before. She took a small amount of the ash and began mixing it with a special clay that her grandmother had included with the tools. The mixture would become hard as stone when it dried, but while it was soft, it could be shaped into almost anything. "The council thinks they are clever," Sujin continued, her hands moving with practiced skill. "They have made a law that no one can bring weapons or armor into their sacred chamber. They expect me to stand before them naked of protection, weak and afraid." Jiho watched as she began shaping the mixture into a delicate flower. The ash of Sergeant Lee Min-ho was becoming something beautiful, something that could be worn as decoration. "But they do not understand humans," Sujin said. "We do not get our strength from metal armor or energy shields. We get our strength from remembering those who came before us, from carrying their sacrifice with us wherever we go." She set the first piece aside to dry and opened another container. This one contained the remains of Dr. Park Hye-jin, who had died trying to save alien children from a plague. The doctor had worked for 3 days without sleep, trying to find a cure. When the sickness finally took her, she had saved over 200 young lives. Working through the night, Sujin shaped piece after piece. Each one told a story of human courage and sacrifice. She made hair ornaments from the ashes of pilots who had died protecting medical ships. She created delicate jewelry from the remains of soldiers who had thrown themselves between civilians and enemy fire. Jiho helped when he could, but mostly he just watched in amazement. His commander was creating something that had never existed before. A garment that would be both beautiful and terrible to see. "The hanbok pattern is traditional," Sujin explained as she worked on the dress itself. "Korean women have worn this style for thousands of years, but this one will be different." She was weaving the bone ornaments into the fabric of the traditional dress. Each piece was placed with care, following patterns that her grandmother had taught her as a child. The dress was becoming a work of art, but it was also becoming something more. "Every piece I add carries the memory of someone who died for others," Sujin said. "When I walk into that council chamber, I will not be alone. I will carry an army of heroes with me." As dawn broke over Nexus Prime, Sujin held up the finished hanbok. It was white as snow, decorated with ornaments that gleamed, like pearls in the morning light. To someone who did not know its true nature, it looked like the most beautiful dress ever created. But Jiho knew better. He could see the strength in every thread, the defiance in every carefully placed ornament. This was not just a dress. This was armor made of memory and courage and the unbreakable will of the human spirit. "They wanted to judge us while we stood defenseless," Sujin said softly. "Instead, they will face us wearing the bones of heroes. Let them try to intimidate the dead." The Great Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. Commander Lee Sujin stood at the entrance, looking up at walls that stretched impossibly high into darkness. The chamber was carved from a single massive crystal that caught light from 1,000 different sources and threw it back in patterns that dazzled the eyes. Thousands of seats filled the curved walls, rising up in tiers like an ancient theater. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat watching, their alien forms creating a sea of strange shapes and colors. Some looked almost human, while others were so different that Sujin could not even guess how they moved or breathed. But the real power in the chamber belonged to 12 beings who sat at the center of it all. The inner circle occupied a raised platform made of black stone that seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it. These were the representatives of the most powerful species in the galaxy, the ones who made decisions that affected billions of lives. Sujin recognized the 3 most important figures. Crystalline singer Morthek of the Vorthak sat like a living statue made of blue diamond. Queen Mother Zilketh of the Kelani clicked her 6 claws against the stone as she watched, with compound eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Energy form Nexalon of the Nexari flickered between shapes, sometimes appearing almost human, sometimes becoming nothing more than a cloud of glowing particles. At the highest point of the chamber sat Chairman Kethulan, an ancient being whose species had founded the council thousands of years ago. He looked like a cross between a tree and a person, with bark-like skin and branches where arms should be. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber, like wind through a forest. Great Assembly is now in session, Chairman Kethulan announced. We gathered to hear charges against the species known as humanity, and their representative, Commander Lee Sujin. A clerk began reading the formal charges. Sujin listened as her people were accused of 17 counts of territorial aggression, 43 violations of the Non-Interference Directive, and 1 count of species-threatening technological development. Each charge carried a potential sentence that could destroy every human colony in the galaxy. The reading took nearly an hour. Sujin stood patiently through it all, her hands folded in front of her. She wore a simple black military uniform while she waited, saving the handbook for the right moment. When the clerk finished, Chairman Kethulan turned his ancient eyes toward the chamber entrance. The accused will now enter and face judgment. Sujin walked back to the preparation room where Lieutenant Park Jiho waited with the handbook. The traditional Korean dress hung on a frame like a piece of art. In the light of the chamber, the bone ornaments gleamed like stars against the white fabric. Are you ready, Commander? Jiho asked quietly. Sujin nodded and began changing into the handbook. Each piece she put on felt like putting on armor, but this armor was made of memory instead of metal. The dress fit perfectly, flowing around her like water. The bone ornaments caught the light and threw it back in soft patterns that seemed almost alive. Jiho helped her arrange the final pieces in her hair. These were the most delicate ornaments, shaped like flowers and birds from the ashes of the youngest soldiers who had died in humanity's wars. Sujin looked at herself in the mirror and saw something that was both beautiful and terrible. They expect a broken human begging for mercy, she said to Jiho. They are going to get something very different. She walked back toward the chamber entrance. The massive doors were made of the same crystal as the walls, but they were so clear they seemed like empty air. Sujin could see the thousands of alien beings waiting inside, all of them watching the entrance. When she stepped through the doors, complete silence fell over the chamber. Every eye, compound or simple or energy-based, focused on her as she walked slowly down the long aisle toward the inner circle. The bone ornaments in her handbook caught the chamber's strange light and threw it back in patterns that had never been seen before. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Each step was measured and deliberate, like a dancer performing a ritual that had been practiced for centuries. The handbook flowed around her with each movement, the bone ornaments creating soft music as they touched against each other. Sujin was halfway to the inner circle when crystalline singer Morthek rose from his seat. His crystal body rang like a bell as he moved, and his voice carried clearly through the chamber. The human violates sacred law, he declared. She wears armor in the chamber of deliberation. This is forbidden by the oldest treaties. Sujin stopped, walking, and looked up at the prosecutor. She smiled, and somehow that smile was more frightening than any weapon could have been. I wear no armor, she said clearly. Her voice carried to every corner of the chamber without effort, as if the crystal walls themselves were helping her speak. Morthek gestured toward her with one crystalline arm. The scanners detect protective materials. The human seeks to deceive us. Chairman Kethulan raised one branch-like arm and the chamber's security systems activated. Beams of light swept over Sujin from every angle, analyzing every molecule of what she wore. The results appeared on holographic displays that filled the air above the inner circle. The scans showed exactly what Sujin knew they would show. No metal, no synthetic materials, no energy shields, no protective elements of any kind. The handbook registered as nothing more than cloth and organic decorations. The scans detect no armor. Chairman Kethulan announced. The human may proceed. But Morthek was not finished. His crystalline form grew brighter as his anger increased. She wears the bones of the dead. This is an insult to the sacred nature of this chamber. Sujin looked directly at the crystal. Prosecutor. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, but it carried an undertone that made even the bravest aliens in the chamber feel uncomfortable. I wear only memory, she said. I carry with me the remains of those who died protecting others. If you find that threatening, perhaps you should ask yourself why the memory of human sacrifice disturbs you so much. She began walking again, each step bringing her closer to the inner circle. The bone ornaments in her hair caught the light and created patterns that looked almost like faces, as if the dead themselves were watching the proceedings. Queen Mother Zilketh clicked her claws nervously. Energy form. Nexalon flickered between shapes more rapidly than before. Even Chairman Kethulan seemed to lean back slightly as Sujin approached. When she reached the center of the chamber, Sujin stopped and faced the inner circle. She stood, perfectly still, her hands at her sides, looking up at the beings who thought they could judge humanity. I am ready to begin, she said simply. The trial that would determine the fate of humanity was about to start, but already the balance of power in the chamber had shifted. The aliens had expected to face a desperate human begging for mercy. Instead, they found themselves looking at a woman who wore the bones of heroes like a crown, who carried the strength of the dead in every thread of her dress. The Great Assembly held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. Crystalline singer Morthek stood before the Great Assembly like a pillar of blue fire. His crystal body caught the chamber's light and threw it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When he began to speak, his voice rang through the chamber like broken glass falling on stone. Honored members of the council, he began. We gather today to judge the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known. Humans spread across space like a plague, taking what they want and destroying what they cannot control. Holographic displays filled the air above the chamber floor. The first image showed human ships crossing into space that the aliens claimed as their own. The ships looked small and fragile compared to the massive alien vessels that surrounded them, but Morthek spoke as if they were weapons of mass destruction. Here we see human vessels violating the borders established by this council, Morthek continued. They ignore our laws and push into territory that belongs to peaceful species. Commander Sujin watched the display with calm eyes. She knew the real story behind those images. The human ships were colony vessels, carrying families who wanted to build homes on empty worlds. The borders Morthek spoke of had been drawn up in secret meetings, long after humans had already settled in those areas. The next image showed human soldiers fighting against alien raiders, but the context had been carefully edited to make the humans look like the aggressors. The display showed human weapons firing, human ships attacking, human soldiers advancing. It did not show the alien pirates who had been attacking civilian transports, or the innocent families the humans were trying to protect. Behold their violence, Morthek declared. Humans cannot exist peacefully alongside other species. They know only war and conquest. For 3 hours, the Crystal prosecutor presented his case. Each piece of evidence was carefully chosen to show humans in the worst possible light. Morthek spoke of human expansion as if it were an invasion. He described human military actions as if they were unprovoked attacks. He painted a picture of humanity as monsters who threatened the peace of the entire galaxy. When Morthek finally finished, he turned toward Sujin with his crystalline arms spread wide. The evidence is clear, he announced. Humanity must be Stop before they destroy us all. I call for immediate orbital bombardment of all human colonies and the complete elimination of this threat to galactic peace." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the alien representatives nodded in agreement, while others looked uncertain. Sujin noticed that many of the smaller species seemed afraid to speak against the three major powers. Chairman Kethulan raised one branch-like arm for silence. "The accused may now present her defense," he announced in his voice like wind through trees. Sujin stood slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. The bone ornaments in her handbuck caught the light as she moved, creating patterns that seemed to dance across the crystal walls. When she reached the speaking platform, she did not immediately begin to defend humanity's actions. Instead, she began to tell stories. "Honored Counsel," she said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber, "the prosecutor speaks of human violence, but he does not tell you why that violence was necessary." She touched a delicate bone flower that had been woven into her sleeve. "This ornament contains the ashes of Dr. Kim Hye-jin. She was not a soldier or a warrior. She was a medical researcher working to cure a plague that was killing Nexari children." Sujin looked directly at energy form Nexulan as she spoke. The shifting being flickered more rapidly, clearly uncomfortable. "Pirates attacked Dr. Kim's research station," Sujin continued. "They wanted to steal her work and sell it to the highest bidder, even though children were dying while they delayed the cure. Dr. Kim could have escaped, but she chose to stay and defend her research. She died holding the cure that saved 10,000 Nexari children." She moved to another ornament, this one shaped like a small bird. "Captain Cho Min-ho died defending a Vorthak merchant vessel from raiders. The merchants were carrying medical supplies to a colony that had been hit by earthquakes. Captain Cho's ship was outnumbered 20-1, but he held the raiders off until the supply ship could reach safety." As Sujin spoke, she touched different pieces of her bone jewelry. Each one represented a different human who had died protecting others. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Every story she told was about humans who had sacrificed themselves to save alien lives. "Lieutenant Yang Taesu threw himself on a plasma grenade to protect a school full of Kalani younglings," she said, looking at Queen Mother Zilketh. "The explosion left nothing but ash, but 37 alien children lived to see their families again." The chamber had grown completely quiet. Even the representatives who had seemed eager to condemn humanity were now listening with uncomfortable attention. Sujin reached up and touched an ornament in her hair, a delicate piece shaped like a star. Private Lee De-eun was 19 years old when she died. She was guarding a refugee camp filled with civilians from 6 different species. When hostile forces attacked, she could have retreated with the other soldiers. Instead, she stayed behind to give the refugees time to escape. She held off 50 enemies by herself for 6 hours. "These are the humans you call monsters," Sujin said, her voice growing stronger. "These are the people you want to destroy. Every piece of bone jewelry I wear represents someone who died protecting others, someone who chose to sacrifice their life so that strangers could live." Crystalline singer Morthek rose from his seat, his form blazing with angry light. "The human tells stories to distract from the evidence. Her people are still a threat that must be eliminated." Sujin turned to face him directly. "I am not telling stories to distract from evidence," she said calmly. "I am presenting evidence that you chose to ignore. You show images of human ships crossing borders, but you do not mention that those borders were drawn in secret, without consulting the humans who were already living there. You show human weapons firing, but you do not show the pirates and raiders they were firing at." She began walking slowly around the chamber, her bone ornaments catching the light with each step. "You fear humanity not because we are evil, but because we refuse to kneel. You fear us because we will not let you control us the way you control other species." The truth hung in the air like a physical thing. Many of the smaller alien species looked at each other with new understanding. They had been told that humans were dangerous aggressors, but the evidence suggested something very different. Sujin stopped in front of the inner circle and looked up at the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy. "You want to judge humanity?" she said. "Very well. Judge us by our actions. Judge us by the aliens we have saved. the lives we have protected, the sacrifices we have made for people we had never even met. The chamber remained silent as her words echoed through the crystal walls. The trial was far from over, but already the balance had shifted in ways the prosecutors had never expected. The silence in the great assembly chamber stretched like a held breath. Commander Sujin stood in the center of the crystal floor, surrounded by thousands of alien beings who had expected to see humanity's representative beg for mercy. Instead, they found themselves listening to stories of sacrifice that many had never heard before. Chairman Kethulan shifted in his seat, his bark-like skin rustling like leaves in the wind. "The human presents an interesting defense," he said slowly, "but the charges remain. Humanity has expanded beyond acceptable boundaries and developed weapons that threaten galactic stability." Sujin smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "You speak of acceptable boundaries and galactic stability. Let me tell you about the messages my people intercepted 3 months ago." She reached into the folds of her handbag and withdrew a small device. The chamber's security systems immediately activated, scanning the object for weapons or threats. The scanners found nothing dangerous, just a simple data storage unit. "This contains communications between members of the Inner Circle," Sujin announced. "Communications about how to eliminate humanity before we develop faster-than-light weapons technology." Crystalline Singer Morthek rose sharply from his seat. "The human presents illegal surveillance data. This violates council law and should be dismissed." "The law you speak of," Sujin replied calmly, "states that evidence illegally obtained cannot be used against council members in criminal proceedings. But this is not a criminal trial. This is a hearing about humanity's right to exist. And the evidence shows that you have already decided our fate." She activated the device and alien voices filled the chamber. The translation system made the words clear for every species to understand. "The humans advance too quickly," came the voice of Queen Mother Zilketh. "Their shipbuilding capacity has doubled in the past year. Soon they will have vessels that can challenge our own. More concerning is their weapons development," added Energy Form Nexulan. "Our spies report that they are close to perfecting plasma cannons that could penetrate our shields." The most damning voice belonged to Crystalline Singer Morthek himself. "We must act before they become too strong to stop. A fabricated trial will give us legal justification for a preemptive strike." The recording continued for several minutes, laying out the conspiracy in detail. The 3 major species had planned everything from the beginning. The trial was meant to be a show, with predetermined results that would justify the destruction of every human colony in the galaxy. When the recording ended, chaos erupted in the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of worlds began talking at once, their voices creating a noise like a storm. Many of the smaller species looked shocked and angry. They had been told that humans were the threat, but now they learned that the real danger came from the Council's most powerful members. Chairman Kethulan called for order, but it took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. When he finally spoke, his ancient voice sounded tired. "The evidence presented raises serious questions about the charges," he admitted. "However, the concerns about human expansion remain valid." Sujin began removing pieces of her bone jewelry, placing each one carefully on the speaker's platform. With each piece, she named the warrior it represented and described how they died. "Sergeant Park Dong-hyun died defending a Vorthak mining station from slave raiders," she said, placing a delicate bone bracelet on the platform. "The raiders wanted to capture the workers and sell them in illegal markets. Sergeant Park held them off for 8 hours while the workers escaped through underground tunnels." She removed another piece, this one shaped like a small sword. "Captain Kim So-ra died protecting a convoy of Nexari medical ships. Pirates wanted to steal the ships and sell them as pleasure craft for wealthy criminals. Captain Kim rammed her ship into the pirate flagship, destroying both vessels but saving the medical convoy." The pile of bone ornaments grew as Sujin continued her testimony. Each piece represented a human life, sacrificed to protect aliens. A story of courage that put the lie to Morthek's claims about human aggression. Lieutenant Choi Jun-seo died defending a space station where Kalani scientists were developing new water purification technology, Sujin said. Raiders attacked because they wanted to steal the technology and sell it. Lieutenant Choi fought alone against 30 enemies, buying time for the scientists to complete their work and transmit the data to colonies that desperately needed clean water. By now, even some members of the inner circle looked uncomfortable. The evidence was overwhelming. Every human death Sujin described involved protecting alien civilians or defending Allied positions. The pattern was too clear to deny. Queen Mother. Zilketh clicked her claws nervously against her seat. The human tells individual stories, but they do not change the larger picture. Humanity still expands too quickly and develops weapons too advanced for galactic peace. Sujin looked up at the insect-like being with eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. You speak of weapons too advanced for peace. Let me tell you about the weapons humanity has developed. She gestured, and holographic displays appeared showing human military technology. But instead of the advanced weapons the aliens feared, the display showed medical equipment, water purification systems, and food production technology. These are the weapons that terrify you, Sujin said. Medical scanners that can detect diseases in their earliest stages. Food processors that can turn basic organic matter into nutritious meals. Water purification systems that can clean the most contaminated sources. The displays changed to show human colonies, but not the military installations the aliens expected. Instead, they showed farms and hospitals, schools and research centers. Children of a dozen different species played, together in parks while their parents worked side by side in laboratories and workshops. You fear us because we make friends instead of subjects, Sujin continued. You fear us because the species we encounter choose to join us willingly rather than submit to conquest. You fear us because we prove that the galaxy does not have to be ruled by fear and intimidation. She removed the final ornament from her hair, a bone flower that represented the youngest casualties of human conflicts. The chamber watched in complete silence as she placed it atop the growing pile of human remains. Private Lida Un was 19 years old when she gave her life to protect alien children, Sujin said softly. She had never met those children before. They were not her species, not her people, not her responsibility. But when they needed protection, she provided it, even though it cost her everything. Sujin spread her arms wide, her now plain hanbok somehow more magnificent than any military uniform. This is what you want to destroy. This is what you call a threat to galactic peace. People who die for strangers. People who sacrifice everything to protect the innocent. People who judge others not by their species or their power, but by their willingness to do what is right. She looked directly at each member of the inner circle in turn. So judge us if you can. Condemn us if you dare. But understand that if you choose to make war on humanity, you will not face an empire seeking conquest. Her voice became as hard, as steel, and as hot as fire. You will face the inheritors of these warriors' legacy. You will face beings who know that some things are worth dying for. And that knowledge makes us the most dangerous force this galaxy has ever seen, because we are not afraid of you. The great assembly chamber fell completely silent. Even the air recycling system seemed to pause as Sujin's words echoed through the crystal walls. The aliens had thought they were judging humanity, but instead they found themselves being judged by the memory of human sacrifice and the promise of human courage. The trial was about to reach its conclusion, but everyone in the chamber knew that the real verdict had already been delivered. The great assembly chamber remained frozen in silence as Commander Sujin stood beside the pile of bone ornaments she had placed on the speaker's platform. Each piece caught the crystal chamber's strange light and threw it back in patterns that seemed to shift and dance like living things. The remains of human heroes lay before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, silent witnesses to a truth that could not be denied. Chairman Kethulan was the first to move. The ancient being leaned forward in his seat, his branch-like arms creaking like old wood. The inner circle will recess to consider the evidence presented, he announced. Crystalline Singer Morthek rose sharply from his seat. There is nothing to consider, he declared. The humans remain a threat regardless of their individual actions. The original charges stand. But Queen Mother Zilketh was no longer clicking her claws in agreement. The insect-like being sat perfectly, still her compound eyes reflecting the light from Sujin's bone ornaments. The evidence raises questions, she said slowly. Perhaps we should examine it more carefully. Energy form. Nexulan flickered between shapes more rapidly than before. The energy being seemed unable to settle on a stable form, shifting from humanoid to abstract patterns and back again. The recordings of our private discussions, it said. How did the humans obtain them? Sujin smiled coldly. The same way you obtained intelligence about our weapons development and colony expansion, through networks of spies and informants. The difference is that we use our information to protect ourselves, while you use yours to plan genocide. Word hung in the air like a physical blow. Genocide. The complete destruction of an entire species. Many of the smaller alien representatives looked shocked at hearing it spoken so plainly. Chairman Kethulan raised his arms for silence. The inner circle will recess, he repeated firmly. All other representatives will remain in the chamber. The 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy filed out through a hidden door behind their platform. Sujin watched them go, then turned to face the thousands of other aliens who remained in their seats. Many of them were staring at her with expressions she could not read, but she sensed that something fundamental had changed. Lieutenant Park Ji-ho appeared beside her, having been allowed into the chamber during the recess. Commander, he said quietly, long-range scanners are detecting movement from the Vorthak, Kalani, and Nexari fleets. They may be preparing to attack regardless of the trial's outcome. Sujin nodded without surprise. She had expected as much. Send a coded message to our ships, she ordered. Have them prepare for immediate departure, but do not take any aggressive action. Let our enemies make the first move if they choose war. While they waited for the inner circle to return, something unexpected began to happen in the chamber. Representatives from the smaller species started approaching Sujin's position. They came one by one at first, then in small groups, until a steady stream of aliens was walking down to the chamber floor. The first to reach her was a being that looked like a cross between a bird and a reptile, with feathers that changed color as it moved. I am speaker for the Roost Kalaheth of the Averni, it said in a voice like wind chimes. My people remember when human ships defended our colony from raiders 5 years ago. 17 humans died saving Averni children they had never met. A slug-like creature with dozens of eye stalks came next. Trademaster Gulonex of the Malari Consortium, it announced. Human merchants helped us establish profitable trade routes when the major species tried to exclude us from galactic commerce. They asked for nothing in return except fair dealing. More aliens followed. Each one had a story about human kindness, human sacrifice, or human protection. The pattern that Sujin had established with her bone ornaments was being repeated by dozens of species across the galaxy. Humanity had made friends not through conquest or intimidation, but through simple acts of courage and compassion. After 2 hours, the inner circle returned to their seats. Chairman Kethulan looked out over the chamber floor, which was now crowded with alien representatives standing near Sujin. His ancient face showed no expression, but his voice carried a weariness that had not been there before. The inner circle has reached a decision, he announced. Crystalline Singer Morthek stood immediately. The charges against humanity are dismissed, he said, his crystal form dim with anger. However, this council maintains the right to monitor human expansion and development. Sujin felt no sense of victory. She had expected this outcome once the evidence became impossible to ignore. But she also knew that the real threat had not passed. The trial is concluded, Chairman Kethulan declared. All representatives may return to their homeworlds. As the chamber began to empty, Sujin carefully gathered her bone ornaments and returned them to their containers. Each piece was precious to her, not just as a symbol of human sacrifice, but as a connection to the warriors who had made that sacrifice real. Ji-ho approached with more intelligence reports. Commander, the Kelani fleet is withdrawing, but the Vorthak and Nexari ships are still in attack formation. Before Sujin could respond, speaker for the Roost Kalaheth appeared beside them. The Averni fleet stands ready to assist humanity if needed, the bird-like being announced. We have not forgotten our debts. Trademaster Gulonex slithered over on his dozens of legs. The Malari Defense Force may be small, But it is at your disposal, he declared. Human friendship has value beyond mere trade agreements. One by one, representatives from 47 different species offered their support to humanity. Most were smaller civilizations with limited military power, but together they represented a significant force. More importantly, they represented something that the major species had not expected: proof that humans had built genuine alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. The Vorthak and Nexari fleets found themselves facing not just human ships, but vessels from dozens of allied species. Faced with a war that might spread across the entire galaxy, they chose to withdraw. 3 days later, Sujin stood once again at the window of the Indomitable as it traveled through space toward human territory. But this time the ship was not alone. 47 alien vessels traveled with them, carrying ambassadors who wanted to formalize their alliances with humanity. "Commander," Jiho said as he joined her at the window, "long-range communications is receiving requests from 16 additional species. They want to establish diplomatic relations with humanity." Sujin smiled as she watched the stars. "The council wanted to judge us," she said. "Instead, we judge them. We showed the galaxy what they really are, and what we really are." She thought about the bone ornaments safely stored in their containers, about the warriors they represented, and about the legacy those warriors had left behind. The dead had spoken through her voice, and their message had been heard across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer alone among the stars. The trial that was meant to destroy them had instead revealed their greatest strength: the ability to inspire others through sacrifice and service. The galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, the Great Assembly Chamber would display a simple metal plaque where Sujin had stood during her testimony. It bore no grand words or complex messages, just a simple statement that visitors from across the galaxy came to read: "In memory of those who proved that the dead need not be forgotten, and the living need not be afraid." The Council's power began its slow decline from that day forward. Other species learned that true strength came not from domination, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. And humanity, wearing the bones of their heroes like armor, continued to spread across the stars, making friends wherever they went and proving that some things were indeed worth dying for. The trial was over, but the real judgment had just begun.